But when I rolled that window up, I had quite a private moment with myself that would end up changing my life forever, which was the admission that I wasn't very good at acting. Maybe I had been paying my bills. Maybe I had acted in about 20, 30 projects at that point. But was I honestly, deep down in my gut, satisfied with my performance in anything? And the answer was no. How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Anytown Actors LAB podcast. My name is Adam Lowder. This is the first episode of the Anytown Actors LAB podcast, so thank you so much for joining. If you're coming from TikTok or some other platform or any other recommendation, I just want to say thank you so much for following along. Thank you so much for engaging, interacting, and sharing at times with this content that I've been putting out on social media. I really appreciate getting to know you guys and appreciate all the feedback that you've given me. My entire purpose in all of this stuff is just to help revitalize the art of acting, to really shed some light on what it's all about, and to make sure that people do see it as an art form so that we can continue to elevate the stories that we as actors are blessed to be a part of, so that we can absolutely do what art is meant to do, which is help people feel less alone. That's my entire goal with this entire social media effort, with all of the content that I make, the podcast that I'm doing now. That's what it's all about. So thank you so much for joining along. This podcast is brand new. So the format is going to change a little bit over time. We're going to adjust, we're going to get better, we're going to get feedback, and we're going to apply all those things that we learn as we go along to make sure that this is a better podcast for you guys, that it's serving you and your interests. And all things acting are going to be covered, but this is always going to be about trying to revitalize the art. So thanks again for joining along for the first episode. Again, my name is Adam Lowder, and I think that's probably a good place to start. Who am I? What am I doing? And what am I always ranting and raving about acting for? I'd love to just give you guys a little bit of insight into me so that you guys can get to know why I do what I do, and maybe that can help, shed some light. The more personal that I get about this stuff, I think it helps you feel like these struggles that we all have as actors and as people, honestly, as artists, are pretty universal. I grew up in the North Texas area, McKinney specifically, and I was really raised there all the way up until I was 18 years old. I was extremely into sports, mostly basketball, but really I didn't discriminate. Any sport that I could play, I did play. Any activity that I could get my hands on, I wanted to do it. And honestly, I wanted to do it to the best of my ability. Once I realized that I didn't want to do basketball anymore, I decided to try acting, and the rest is history. I'll tell you a little bit about that first moment where my joy for acting really started to blossom. But let me go back even further to the very first time I was acquainted with performance. While my brother was at school, I was not yet old enough for kindergarten. So my mom and I used to watch music videos, and for some reason I had such a proclivity to studying performances of musicians, typically country music videos and Michael Jackson. But what I found myself doing was I used to, in the VHS player, I used to put a tape in and I would record Sunday morning country music television videos, and I would really study the performances of the artists that were in the videos. And they were just, singing and dancing to their own songs, but I would really try to get down point by point, movement by movement, moment by moment, the exact thing that I saw them do. And I was like 4 years old. So that was really something that I naturally was drawn to, was performing. And I was trying to understand, like, how can I perform? And I didn't really understand much, but that's what I was doing. My mom was recording it with her camcorder. I hung out with my mom. I would watch tape. I would rehearse and perform. She would dress me up in my cowboy getup, and then she would film me. At night, I remember eating Cinnamon Toast and studying the music videos like Beat It, Billie Jean, and Thriller, and working on the dances and trying to study them for the next day. And so that was my first time being really acquainted with acting, performing of any kind, and music was kind of my first introduction into this performance, this performing arts world. So now flash forward to my first kind of theater class that I took in high school. My buddy is Jonathan Darmraj, aka Big D. This is one of my best friends growing up, but he was really interested in acting, and so was I. So we tried to take a Theater 1 class together. And lo and behold, what did we find? We were in different classes. So our elective class was really frustrating because we weren't in it together. And we thought, man, that was going to be a really fun class to kind of goof off and do something interesting and new and kind of fun. And we ended up being in separate classes, which ended up being a blessing in disguise because I ended up having to really pay attention and try to learn what this acting thing was all about. And my first acting teacher, her name was Mrs. Tooch. I remember she handed me a little packet which had, black and white photo of Konstantin Stanislavski with really like pixelated print, and he couldn't really make out his face. I just saw some like facial hair, and it just seemed like an old photo. And it was very interesting to understand what his philosophy was in this little bitty excerpt or paragraph introducing him to me. And that led to the Meisner section, Sanford Meisner. And once I started to kind of learn a little bit about this idea, I started to get really interested. The idea being, how do we find a way to, although we've rehearsed a play or a scene over and over and over, we're working to make it seem like it's happening for the very first time. And that really fascinated me endlessly. And so when I inevitably was able to participate in some of the plays, I started to try to do that. And I didn't know how to do that. I was a 16-year-old kid that was just trying things out. Maybe some of you out there are the same age and you're maybe having some of the same experiences. And I just became enamored. And one of the things that happened that was the first real experience with, okay, maybe I'm acting in some sort of instinctive way was acting in a play called The Dining Room by A.R. Gurney. Pretty much a bad play, to be honest with you, but I hadn't read many plays at that point. And so, there were a lot of characters. So a lot of the actors in the high school production, we got cast in multiple parts. So I think I had 4 or 5 parts that I played, one of which was a character named Standish. And Standish's dilemma was that his brother, who was homosexual, was beat up. And I was hearing about this crime that happened, this hate crime. And my struggle is to, go and defend my brother and put myself potentially in harm's way so that I could help him and defend him and come to his honor and his aid. And one night when I was acting in that show, in that little performance in that little high school play, which is really down the road from where I'm at right now, I became really affected by the circumstances. I became very swept up in the circumstances of the moment. And I was basically in the scene by kissing my wife and telling my son, like, I'm going to go and I'm going to help my brother. And I don't care what happens to me. And I left the stage and I was in the wings there and I just broke down. I just broke down crying. And obviously I was moved by the given circumstances. And this is the first time I experienced what I now know is the definition of acting I follow, pioneered and created by Sanford Meisner, which is acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And I felt like I felt that a little bit. Was it brilliant? No, I'm sure that it was not. I didn't really know how to act, but it was my first introduction into something kind of mystical, magical, different, new, interesting, surprising, spontaneous, and thus began my foray into this new passion, into these uncharted waters, which eventually led me from this kind of, at the time, medium-sized town of North Texas to New York City. I ended up auditioning for a couple schools in Texas and then one school that was in New York City. And I thought I was going to audition for the summer program, but I ended up going to the regular 2-year program and I got in. That was a 2-year program called the New York Conservatory for Dramatic Arts. At the time, there was also a name for it called the School of Film and Television. This was a conservatory is typically a 2-year program that's specialized in its training for some sort of art form. There's music, dance, art, acting conservatories all over the world, but this one was about on-camera acting. And so I had studied the pamphlet, I had researched the website, I had seen that they only accepted a certain amount of students every year, despite how many auditions they got. And I prepared 2 monologues, both influenced by Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is really the first actor that I saw where I became transfixed that this is there's something more to this than just putting on a mask and kind of being somebody else. This guy seems to be revealing something about himself that was really captivating and really surprising, and also helped me feel things. One of those things was less alone. I saw him in the same year in a film called Capote, obviously pretty popular. He won an Oscar for this film where he played Truman Capote, but then I also saw him in that shortly thereafter in a film called Along Came Polly. I don't know if you guys have seen that film, but pretty outrageous comedy starring Ben Stiller and Jennifer Aniston, and he plays this ridiculous character named Sandy Lyle, who is an actor in the movie, and he can't quite let go of the fame he's clinging to from being a child actor, a child prodigy. And so he ends up hiring a documentary crew to follow him around doing an true Hollywood story, and he ends up revealing at the end that it's fake. He's just trying to keep up this charade of fame, which is now long gone. And he brought so much truth and humor and spontaneity to that role, but seeing him contrasted in the role of Truman Capote, which is obviously so different, just left me completely mesmerized. And so the two monologues I chose for my audition were one from Along Came Polly and one from Capote. And the Capote monologue was not done by Philip Seymour Hoffman. It wasn't a Truman Capote thing. It was more the subject, who was guilty of the murdering of this family in Holcomb, Kansas in the 50s. Truman develops a very mysterious relationship with this guy as he interviews him over several months and even years before they're inevitably executed. And so the monologue that I chose was to do one from him, basically, this character, Perry Smith, going through and finally telling him about what happened that night. And it's just a retelling of an event, but I think there was something that I was tapping into that I don't know what it was, that maybe seemed like I had some ability to understand something about a struggle of this degree. I don't know what it was, but the person who was auditioning me for the school, she actually started the school. Her name was Joan C. And she was in Houston, and I drove down with my dad, and I auditioned there. And first thing she said to me was, "You don't even have your man face yet." And I thought, oh, that's probably a really bad sign. I'm probably not good. And she had me do the Capote monologue one more time, and she brought a camera out and she filmed it. And then she kind of asked me why I want to act and, why I want to go to New York. And so I kind of answered to the best of my ability. Honestly, I was so nervous, it was kind of a blur. And a few weeks later, I thought, well, I probably didn't get in. I got a call. And I got some financial aid, scholarship, and I was able to see that, okay, this is actually the most financially viable option for me post high school. My parents didn't have much money. I didn't have any connections to the industry in any way, shape, or form. And so for me, getting into this school was like, it changed my life, obviously. So I went to New York. I studied at that school for 2 years. And I feel like I grew up pretty fast, because going from a smaller town in Texas to New York City is quite a difference. Had to work a bunch of jobs, had to do my best in studying, had to learn acting and learn the art form and try to understand the business and get some headshots and start to establish a reel and build my resume. What brings me to you guys now in trying to carry the torch of the art of acting and helping actors train and learn is because 4 years after I graduated that conservatory school, I was on set it was the fourth project in a row that I had booked that was paid, and I was paying my bills with acting. And I don't know if you guys are actors out there, but if you're not, that's a really hard thing to do, is to pay your bills with acting, especially in the earlier years. And so for me, it was a huge milestone. It was my goal to pay my bills with my acting. And I was doing that. And it was at the end of the year, 2014, and I was shooting this music video called Waiting Here by Jake Isaac. He's a UK artist. And I was booked on this music video, and it was kind of a cool story where my girlfriend and I, or maybe wife, I don't remember at the time what it was, but we go on vacation and we're shooting this thing in Vermont. It's this amazing house. And while we're on vacation, I'm kind of working too much. So I'm on my computer. And so she gets pretty frustrated, and we have a fight, and she storms out. I end up chasing her in the snow, put my boots and my jacket on, I get in my car, and I try to go find her. And what I come upon is a car flipped upside down and her laying in the snow. That's a terrifying moment, obviously, for the character. And there was a moment when I was sitting in the car and we were about to do another take. And I was by myself. The director came up to me, his name's Kevin, came up to me, rolled down the window, and he basically really wanted me to cry. And if you're an actor, you know, kind of that moment, it's a lot of pressure and you think, oh no, can I do that? I don't know if I can. And so I did my best. But when I rolled that window up, I had quite a private moment with myself that would end up changing my life forever, which was the admission that I wasn't very good at acting. Maybe I had been paying my bills. Maybe I had acted in about 20, 30 projects at that point, but was I honestly, deep down in my gut, satisfied with my performance in anything? And the answer was no. And when I asked the question, well, do I think I can accomplish what this director wants me to do? Do I think I can produce some tears of some kind? The answer was absolutely not. And I just felt very inadequate. And it wasn't that he made me feel bad in any way. He didn't. He didn't even, once I did the take and I didn't cry, he didn't get mad or anything. I had this private thought, which was like, I'm not good. And it didn't feel like normal kind of negative self-talk. It felt like, no, this is something you need to address. If you can't act, what are you going to do? So we wrapped that shoot. It ended up going really well. The music video is not that bad, honestly. I didn't do terribly. And, you know, that's a testament really to the director and the way that they approached it, because it was a conducive environment for creativity and collaboration. And it was really great. But it wasn't really because of what I was bringing to the table. So I kind of vowed to myself, you know, end of the year, New Year's resolution, I'm going to find a class. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, Katie, she was taking a class. She'd only been in this class for a month or two, and she kept saying great things about it. But my wife is pretty hyperbolic at times, and she knows this. And so I was thinking, well, I don't know how great it is. You know, I've been to a lot of acting classes. They're not always great. And I was starting to second guess my own conservatory, which cost tens of thousands of dollars, even though I had financial aid and scholarships, but it didn't really leave me with a great acting foundation. I'm on set and I can't even cry. I can't even do what the director wants, and I don't feel confident. So I got to find a class, but how am I going to find one? And so I ended up auditing a few classes in New York City. I will not name their names. They were not good. I was very frustrated. I felt like I'm never going to find a great class. Where am I going to go? And I decided to say, all right, you know what? Let me try this class out, this one that Katie's doing. So I audit January 9th, 2015. I still have the notebook with the notes, and I'm watching the 20 plus students work, and I'm listening to the feedback and the notes and the teaching points, and I've never heard the things I'm hearing before. Everything is just vibrating with truth and authenticity and substance. And I'm like, wow, this is really, there's something here. There's something real going on. I need this. I ended up taking about 9 pages of notes, had a short interview with the teacher where I just discussed things. And he said to me, well, what's your background? And I said, look, I know Meisner. This was a Meisner technique program. It was a 2-year program, Playhouse West, but it was in New York. So it was an offshoot of the one in Los Angeles. So it was a 2-year Meisner program. He said, are you familiar with Meisner technique? And of course I think about that pamphlet, right? That little booklet that Miss Tooch gave me years ago. And I'm like, I got that. But also at my conservatory, I was taught by this guy named John Terrell. And John Terrell was a student of Sanford Meisner's back in the day when Sanford Meisner was still alive and still teaching. And he was the first teacher I had at the conservatory, but I only had him for a semester. I had him for about 3 months. And so we ended up doing some repetition, doors and activities, a couple scenes, some spoon rivers, and then I was out the door. Unfortunately, because that was one of the best experiences I had, but I never got to work with him ever again, unfortunately. So I told him about this, and he said, well, look, you have some Meisner experience. You want to go to the advanced class. Your girlfriend's in the class. It's okay. You can go there. So I said, you know what? I don't. I really want to be in that class, and the work I was seeing was incredible, and everyone seems really great, and Katie's going on and on about how awesome it is, but I think I really want to go back to the beginning. can you take me to the beginning? And he's like, yeah, you can do the beginner class. There's some makeup classes coming up. Go to those. We'll go through repetition. We'll start from square one and we'll build it one day at a time, one moment at a time. I said, thank you so much. Showed up to the makeup class. I did repetition, made a bunch of mistakes. I took it very, very slow. And I started my process for rebuilding my foundation for acting training so that I could ultimately become the best actor I could be. And I can get into more of this, the specifics of this program later down the road. But for now, I'll kind of leave it at that. What that ended up being was it left me with a real foundation for acting. I went to that class twice a week, 3 hours at a time for 2 years. We were required to maintain attendance at that school to rehearse every single day. I had classmates, so I was able to reach out to them and rehearse with them. So we were able to rehearse with each other, which was really, really helpful. And I ended up just really working as hard as I could. I put the hold on the momentum for the bookings that I was getting. And that was a tough decision to do, especially as actors. You don't know when that momentum is going to come back. But I said, this is more important than that. So I paused that and I worked on my training. And all of the work that I ended up getting and that I ended up doing was a total 180 from what I had been doing before. I'll share this one last story and then I'll kind of wrap up this first episode. I was cast in this short film, which I had worked with this director before. And the short film was something that this director wrote himself. And the premise essentially, or like the little synopsis, is that I am playing the husband of this woman who we are both hosting another couple. And they're about to come over. And my character's invited them over. And at the very top of the short film, I'm complaining about how much I don't like them. I don't want them to come over. And they do this and they do this and they do this. And every time they do this, it's just so frustrating, you know? And that's the beginning scene, the beginning little kind of opening speech. And her argument is like, you invited them over. If you don't like them, why are you having them? I'm having second thoughts, whatever. So I had learned in my new program of acting, this was about a year into the school, the tool emotional preparation. And so I decided to do kind of like a little fantasy before, because I decided my emotional ballpark is frustrated. And so I decided to have this, like, in my head, I was kind of imagining a phone call that I was on with somebody. I was like very frustrated with them. And it put me in that emotional state for the first moment only. And I knew what I was doing in my scene, because the foundation of acting is the reality of doing. And what I was doing was I was simply complaining about them. And that's something I can get done, you know, want to convince her that these people are not worth inviting over. And she has the opposite opinion. So I'm trying to convince her, right? This is something I can get done. And I decided to prepare with this imaginary phone call that would put me in a state of frustration. And when we started shooting the first take, as we were rolling, sound speed, camera rolling, I'm doing this speech and I'm pretty worked up. The emotional preparation has worked. And the director in the middle of the take comes over to me and he's like, Adam, are you okay? And I was like, what? And he was like, are you okay? What's wrong? And I was like, I'm acting. And everyone on set was like, what is he doing? What is he doing? And he looked mortified because he was like, duh, I wrote the script. What's wrong with me? And maybe he saw a little bit of my preparation and he thought, what's he doing with this like imaginary conversation he's having? He must have thought I was upset. And I said, no, I was just emotionally preparing. And he was like, wow, that was really good, because it was so believable. I even thought you were upset. And I said, well, yeah, I'm just trying to bring truth to the moment, you know, whatever. And that had never happened to me before on set. You know, as actors, especially those that are committed to trying to be as excellent and real as you possibly can be, you know, sometimes there's like a start-stop element to your acting where you're like, oh, this person's definitely acting and now they're done. And once they're done acting, they kind of come alive. It's a really frustrating thing to witness, but also to experience more so than anything. And I wanted my acting to feel like life. I wanted my acting to feel like it was happening for the first time. If you go back to my first mystical thought about acting, was you're rehearsing it over and over and over so it can seem like it's happening for the first time. So here I am 10 years later, and I'm like, I'm doing that. And that was when I said, okay, this training's working. I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to double down on my approach. I'm going to just keep doing it. And that ended up revolutionizing, like I said, my entire artistic approach. I write and I direct and I produce films as well. So this actually helped influence that. But from an acting perspective, it helped me access my talent. It gave me a foundation upon which to build a career. And it gave me the confidence I was seeking so that I would never have to experience the feeling of rolling my window up on set and feeling like I'm not really doing a good job. I'm not really serving the story. I'm not really helping the director tell the story they're dying to tell. Once I had that, it was off to the races and everything started to change. I started to get better jobs, better access to agents, managers, casting directors. My reputation, I think, started to change and really developed a new momentum. And I leveled up in a way that I didn't think was even possible, but that I had dreamed of my whole adult life. So that is just an abridged version of my career in New York City. I spent 11 years there. I've acted in over 60 projects. And now I still act, but I also teach. I teach actors all over the world through Zoom, one-on-one only. I don't do group calls. I only do one-on-one through Zoom because I think that's the best way for them to grow if we are going to do it over video call, because I do think in-person acting class is the best bet, which I also do in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And this is just as much a passion to me as acting is, as writing is, as storytelling, directing, anything is. The gratification that I experience when I watch an actor come into their confidence and the light bulb go off and them go, I think I know how to do this now, is something I can't describe. I am trying to be for others now what I wish was there for me when I was first starting out. You know, I'm only 32 years old. I'm still pretty young, but I think I have enough that I've experienced that can actually help you guys. So I'm here to help you. I'm here to revitalize the art of acting with you. I'm here to help you become the best actors you can be so I can carry the torch of discovering the truth of the moment and helping actors access their potential by applying effective tools, techniques, and principles that actually work. So this podcast is going to be dedicated to those principles. It's going to be dedicated to the art of acting. We're going to talk about everything to do with acting, the business, the industry, questions that you guys have, answers hopefully I can give that are helpful, guests that will come on to discuss their experiences with acting. We're going to do personal stories. We're going to do inspiring topics. Everything that you see on my TikTok page or on my social media platforms, we're going to expand those in a long form for episodes like this. I really appreciate you guys jumping in, taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope this has been valuable. I know it's just the beginning. This is just an introduction. There's much, much more to come where I will be really trying to work on producing things that are of value to you, that's worth your time. And so join me on this ride. If you do not follow Anytown Actors Lab on TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram, by all means, follow along. We share acting videos, acting tips that really, really help you guys stay in the moment, be reminded of things that actually work so that you guys can become the best actors you can be, elevate the stories that you're blessed to be a part of, and help revitalize the art of acting. Thank you guys for joining along, and I will see you guys on the next episode.